Hello and welcome. Today is the second of the three-part series that demonstrates how to set up a Plex Media Server appliance. In the first part, we downloaded the software on our Windows computer and finished. We had Ubuntu 20.04 server installed on a USB pen drive, and today what we're going to do is we're going to boot from that pen drive onto what will become our Plex Media Server appliance. Without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my USB pen drive into my appliance and I'm going to boot from that. And as the machine is booting, you would normally need to press a particular key. It could be F2, it could be delete, it could be F8, and in a menu that comes up, you would specify that you want to boot from your USB pen drive. I've done that, and the screen I have now is the Ubuntu installer, and I'm going to choose the first option, install Ubuntu Server. For some, you might have Ubuntu on a CD-ROM, in which case the procedure would be rather similar to what I'm doing. As we go along in today's session, you need to be very careful that this process will write to the hard disk of what will become your appliance. Essentially, the appliance is a computer with a hard disk, and if that hard disk contains another operating system or it contains data, you will irrevocably be unable to recover it, or an OS may not be able to boot into your original OS. So please be aware of that. The gist of this appliance is that this is a dedicated machine, meaning that it will have no other operating system. It will only perform one particular function, and that function is to run Plex Media Server and to provide media content through it. So in my case, I have no problem with that. If you're very new to Plex, or you're new to the whole idea of how to get Ubuntu and how to put it on a USB pen drive, I suggest you watch the first video. The boot process of Ubuntu is undergoing. Now, the first prompt I'm asked is to specify which language I would like to go with. In my case, that's English, so I'm going to keep the default. I am told that the installer in my case is not the latest version, and I'm asked whether I would like to update. I'm going to say yes. This takes a few seconds. The keyboard layout and the language I would like to use. In my case, I'm going to leave the default. So I'm going to done. The first point of discussion and where we have to stop a bit. By default, the Ubuntu installer acquires an IP address from my DHCP server, and in this case it is 192.168.16.37. If you want to accept the default, you may do so, but do realize that if you go with this route and you keep your appliance switched on for a period of time, the next time you switch it on, it might acquire a different IP address. When an IP address is acquired through DHCP, it has a lease. And especially on networks that have a lot of devices, IPs can vary. A change of IP address may end up making your Plex Media Server inaccessible from outside your network. That is one thing. Point number two is that since, as we shall see, I will be accessing my Plex Media Server for basic maintenance and to put media onto it, I would prefer to have an IP address that is not changing. So the IP address it gets today will remain constant with that machine, irrespective of whether I keep the appliance off for beyond the DHCP network lease time. In my case, I'm going to change this. There are two ways you can skin this cat to get a fixed IP. The first one is to go to your DHCP router and tell that router that this particular computer will always get a fixed IP address. If you want to go that route, what you have to do is move onto the network identifier, press enter, choose info, and if you scroll down, I had to move up and scroll down, you will get to a value which I am highlighting now, which is the address. That is known as the MAC address. In my case, it's 000C29F71CDF. And you would tell your DHCP router that that particular network address needs to always get a fixed IP. The approach I'm going to take is I'm going to specify an IP address myself. My network is configured in such a way that I have a range of IPs which are outside the DHCP range. In this particular case, rather than choose automatic, I'm going to choose manual, and I'm presented with the screen I have here. Subnet, here we're going to go a bit technical. If you noticed, my network is configured to use 192.168.16. It's a class C network, so essentially that means that the last block, my point 37, is the only thing that is changing on devices in my network. Essentially, it means I can have 254 devices. That form suits my case. So in this case, I'm going to choose the subnet. So it will be 192.168.16.0. And the /24 means that the first three components of that address remain constant. The address is going to be the address of this particular appliance. In that case, I'm going to use 192.168.16.9. My gateway. In order to get details of my gateway, if I do not know them, I'm going to switch back to my Windows machine, type in command prompt, and I'm going to type ipconfig/o. That will give me a dump of the networks I have. I will find the adapter I have which is connected to the internet. This is my Windows machine. In this case, it's 27. And two things that interest me now is the gateway 192.168.16.1 and the DNS server. Let's start with the gateway. So that is the value I'm going to copy into my Ubuntu machine. So the gateway is 192.168.1, and the last value I have is the name server. Again, that corresponds to the DNS servers in my ipconfig, and I'm using my router, and I also have Cloudflare, Quad9, and Google DNSs here. I'm going to do that. Separate each IP address using a comma. Search domains, I'm going to leave that empty, and I'm going to save. You will notice that the IP address has changed to the one provided, and I now say done. I'm asked whether I have a proxy. In my particular case, I do not have, so I'll leave that blank. The question I'm asked now is from where I want to get updates and software, and I stick to the default. The question we have here is probably the most critical, in that this is asking us where do we want to put our installation of Ubuntu. In my case, as I said, this is a dedicated machine, so I'm going to use the entire disk for that purpose. And since I have nothing sensitive, all I'll have here is media, I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to set up an LVM group, nor am I going to encrypt. The idea behind my reasoning is that I don't want to add any overheads to the appliance. As much as possible, all the resources of the machine should be directed towards Plex. This will allow me to use maybe an older machine, or a machine with less resources than I would have had to with a heavier operating system and more bells and whistles. I've chosen the default, and I'm going to agree. The critical question: confirm destructive action. My name, PMS Appliance, your server name. In my case, I'm going to call it Plex Appliance. You can choose any name you want as long as you can recall. A username, administrator, and I'm going to choose a password. I say done. I will check that I want to install OpenSSH server. This will be used when I need to communicate with my machine. I don't have an identity to import. If you have, can import from GitHub or Launchpad, and I'm going to say done. We're almost going to start the installation. I'm being asked whether there are any packages I would like to install. None from this list. And the installation has begun. While that installation is going on, what we are going to do is we're going to configure on our Windows machine the last program we downloaded last time round. If you recall, we downloaded 3 programs. One was Ubuntu, one was Rufus, and the third one was Putty. And while this process is going, we're going to install Putty. Just keep the defaults. As part of my Putty installation, I would like to have the icon on my desktop. That's the only change I'm invoking. Installation is ready, and I'm going to reboot. I'm being asked to remove my installation medium. Ubuntu has booted, and I am in the login prompt. If you look at the prompt, I have the name of my appliance, plex.appliance, and I'm going to log in to it using the credentials I typed in before. And this is my Plex Media Server prompt. Exit from your session, just type exit. The reason for Putty is essentially to facilitate typing in commands into your client. The way we're going to set it up is in such a way that technically once this thing is up and running, you can place it in a corner and you don't need a keyboard and a mouse because all the activity will be done remotely from the comfort of your Windows environment. So I'm going to invoke Putty. In order to connect to my appliance, I'm going to specify the IP address. And to make life easier, I'm going to record these settings. First time I log in, I must verify that this device is the one I want to connect to and that I trust the host. I do. So I'm going to say yes. As you can see, from my Windows environment, I am now accessing the server. The software downloaded in the first session is being justified here. And in fact, as you can see, I am logged into this machine. This is going to make it very easy for us to type in commands and very easy for us to be able to maintain the machine from the comfort of an environment we might be more used to. I am going to now start the process of installing Plex on the machine. All the instructions will be doing here will be shared with you. So the first instruction I'm going to type is to add Plex Media Server to the repository. What you do, you copy from your notepad, and once you right click onto the Putty screen which you have logged in, the instruction gets pasted. I am using sudo, which elevates my rights, and the first time I write it within a session, I must specify my administrator account. We'll see that it's downloading from the repository we specified during the installation. And now I'm going to perform the installation of Plex Media Server. If you look, you will see that the address is the one we specified in our first instruction. We are now being asked whether to keep the configuration file we have one or to replace it. So I am going to replace it with the one that is currently provided by Plex. We have Plex Media Server installed. what we would like to do is to ensure that Plex Media Server is running as a service. Now let me clear my screen. And this command, what essentially does is it extracted Plex Media Server from the list of running services. And as you can see, the service is enabled and running. If Plex had not been enabled, never happened in my test, but I did read that there were instances where for some reason the service was not running. You would invoke this command. I'm going to do it. It does absolutely no harm to do it. In case you didn't know, if you hit your cursor keys, you move through the list of previously typed commands. That hasn't changed from what it was before. This means that every time we switch on the appliance, Plex kicks in and we're ready to go. Another command related to checking that all is well is this command. This gives me a status on the service. It's telling me that it is active running and the time when it was active, process ID, and the memory it is consuming. I rarely need to delve into this, but if you experience any problems, one place I would advise that you can go would be the Plex forums. The output of this command in the appropriate Linux branch of Plex will help others help you. To exit the status screen, press Ctrl+C. One command you should keep in mind is the reboot command or shutdown. Whenever you need to reboot or shut down your appliance, it's always a good idea to do it properly, as we essentially do with Windows. So in this particular case, I'm going to invoke the reboot command. Once I reboot, what happens is that appliance rebooted. So as we normally do sometimes with Windows, if there are nuggets that are bothering us, periodic reboot could help to iron out certain problems and at least give us cleanly booted machine from where to start. Plex has booted and now this session is inactive. Because I rebooted, I broke the session. So what I would do from my Windows machine is invoke Putty again. And as you can see, I'm logged in again. What I'm going to do is to demonstrate that the Plex Media service, even after a reboot, is still enabled. So that shows that now in the day-to-day operation, that issue is taken care of. So let's clear to get to a fresh page. We're going to plan our directories for Plex as we would do in Windows, and just hopping back to my Windows machine. If it were a Windows machine, the way I would lay out my directories is as follows. This is just for demonstration purposes. I would have Plex Media Library to be the root. Under that, I am going to have movies, I'm going to have TV, and I'm going to have photos. That is how I'm going to configure my network. Top and 3 subfolders under it. Obviously, this is Windows. In my case, I need to replicate that in Plex. In Plex, to do that, you will use the make directory, the mkdir. This, again, as I mentioned before, sudo gives me administrative privileges, because without that, certain operations can't be done. I created my directory. To visualize the directory, I'm going to use ls, which is list. You will see that there are a number of system directories, but one of them is Plex Media Library. That is the one I created. I'm going to set the rights for this directory. Now, just a word here. In Linux, you have access rights. You have them also in Windows, but in Ubuntu and other Unix operating systems technically have 3 groupings. You have a grouping for the file owner, You have a grouping for members of the files group, and you have grouping for everyone, what I think in Windows we call everyone. Users who are neither the owners nor the members of the file group. And each one of these may have different access rights. I'm just going to paste the Wikipedia link that explains this for those of us who want to see and learn more about this. A permission of 7 gives full rights. So read, write, and execute. Also, you have the first 7 represents the user, the second number represents the group, and the third represents the other. Now, in my particular case, my particular appliance, since I don't have anything sensitive, and this is an appliance to be used by everyone, it's not meant to hold secure data, I have decided that everyone will have full access to the media. I'm changing the access rights to anything in the Plex Media library to that value. This is relatively important because at times there could be situations where we need to revisit this command. And now I'm going to continue creating my other folders. So I'm creating the movies, I'm creating TV, and I'm created the TV, and now I'm creating my photo. Clear the screen. I'm going to use the list command, and one thing that can save you a lot of time in Ubuntu and Linux is the autocomplete. I know my folder is called Plex Media Server, but if I would rather avoid typing everything in, what I can do is I can type sufficient characters to identify it. Now, what I have done is I've typed ls/p. If I press the tab key, you see nothing happens the first time. The second time, I get all files that match what I have typed up to now. This is a good trick to make life easier. I have 2 files with the same match. So if I add sufficient characters to uniquely identify this command, I then will get, when I press tab, the autocomplete working in. Also, in Linux, you can move with the arrow keys in a command and add, if you have or require to add something you forget, you can add it anywhere down the line. If I press enter and I look, I get my 3 folders, and if you look closely, you will see that this is a directory. Owner has full access, world doesn't have right, and neither does other. I'm going to change that. I'm going to use the chmod command, but if for any reason you forget how to do it, but you just remember the command itself, all Linux commands have help. If you --help, they give you a dump of their help. What I'm going to do, I'm going to type the command I typed earlier, but I'm going to tell it to recurse through some directories. And if you look closely, I have the R flag. I forgot to specify. So if I now go back, you will see that my access rights have changed, and even you will notice the color has changed. Color can be very helpful because it gives you a lot more information. The last part of today's video will relate to connecting our Plex appliance to a folder in Windows. The idea behind this is that you have content on your Windows computer, you have photos, or you have special family movies that today reside on a Windows computer, and rather than move everything onto the appliance, you want to keep these on your Windows computers, but still make them accessible through your Plex appliance. Today we're not going to go into the depth of it, we're just going to set up the framework. What we're going to do here is, again, let's clear the screen to start with a fresh. We're going to install the packages that will allow us to achieve that. In the third session, then we will explore how to set it up. So I'm going to install the CIFS utilities, and I'm going to create a directory that will link to my Windows shares. That concludes the session for today. The last command we're going to do today is the shutdown command. Don't forget, if you need to power down your machine, you should do it as you do in Windows properly. So in that case, I'm going to shut down. If you change your mind and you invoke the shutdown with the option C, that will cancel the shutdown, and the machine has shut down. I hope you found this second of our three-part series interesting. In the next session, we will add content and see how to make our appliance functional and how it will run on a day-to-day basis. Thank you and take care.